I found hooked carp or something. That's a new one on me.
Well, I've just packed away all of my summer kit and reorganised my tackle ready for the winter. Autumn and winter is one of my favourite times of the year, especially for fishing. I like to target a few species that are still very active even as the water temperatures drop, and this year I particularly wanted to target pike. My pike fishing campaign this year got off to an amazing start. I fished the River Derwent on a couple of sessions and landed my personal best pike. However, since then, things have not been going quite so well. I've actually really struggled on the couple of rivers that I've been fishing, and then we had loads of rain, which dumped so much cold water and coloured water into the rivers that it's made it incredibly tough. While conditions were looking so unfavourable on many of my local rivers, I decided it might be a good opportunity to switch to some still waters. I decided to pick one of the largest lakes, which was an old estate lake, on my club book. It was reported to hold a reasonable head of pike, so I decided to head out for a number of sessions deadbaiting to see if I could pick up any of these monsters. For my first session, I woke up quite early while it was still dark on a very, very cold day. I loaded up the car and I was on the road just as the sun was rising. The day was very rainy and overcast, which I thought would be really good pike fishing conditions. When I got to the lake, the water, however, was quite still. I rigged up some dead baits and I got them into some likely looking positions, one in the margins near some reeds and one in the deeper water straight in front of me. It was then a waiting game. I was hoping a pike would pick up the dead baits and the buzzers would sound and we would have a fish on. I waited a while longer and a rainstorm blew in. Fortunately, this stirred up the surface and I was really hopeful of a bite just after the rain had left. However, everything returned to the still calmness and I was back waiting and hoping that something would find and pick up my baits. Unfortunately, the rest of the session passed very uneventfully and I packed up, having landed no fish. Over the space of a few weeks, I headed out on a number of sessions to this lake, being always very optimistic of my chances. However, they always followed the same pattern. Absolutely no interest at all. I switched my location, the baits, and even the rigs I was using, but just couldn't get into the fish at all. However, all of this changed one misty morning when I headed out very early for a session on the floats. Shortly after getting two rigs into position, one lowered almost at my feet, the float was bobbing away with a nice pike having taken the bait. After a short battle, I got it into the net. While I was ecstatic to land my first pike from this lake, and a nice one being 5 or 6 pounds, I was however quite unfortunate in that my camera battery ran out, so I didn't get as much footage of it as I would have liked. I was however extremely relieved just to land a fish at last from this lake. But I decided a rethink was in order. The dead baiting was just not producing, so I decided lure fishing might be the way forward. With lure fishing, you can obviously cover lots of water in a much shorter space of time. So I decided it was time to get out the lure rods and get out there casting around to see just exactly how many pike lived in this lake. Quite fortunately, the weather was clear and bright, which coincided really nicely with my change in method. Water clarity was excellent, so I was even more confident of being able to catch some fish. The first fish I hooked into, however, wasn't quite what I was expecting.
I found hooked carp or something. That's a tench. Oh, bream. Big bream. Well, a bream caught on a lure. Big one as well. Let's get this guy back.
With this first session out of the way and a fish, although not the target species, in the net, I was soon back at the lake, casting the lures around again. Things took another unusual turn at the start of this session. While fishing bottom lures, I hooked something, a fish, although again not the fish I was looking for.
That's a new one on me. Oh, somebody else's lure. Free lure, yay! It's got the trace and everything.
I kept casting and moving, trying different lure patterns and different speeds of retrieval, and eventually I hooked into my first of the target species.
There we go, free, one little jack pike there. Yeah, I think that's a fish. Yes, fish on. Yeah, little jack again. Knew there'd be one back there. Oh, just hooked. Yes.
Although not catching anything massive, I packed up and left, happy just to be able to string a couple of fish together in as many hours. Quite a few weeks went by until I was able to get out again. Obviously over winter it gets darker earlier, and with work commitments I just couldn't put in the hours. However, one evening I did find a spare hour just as it was getting dark and managed to sneak in a quick session. In the low light conditions, I decided to fish a really large paddle tail lure to create loads of vibrations and attraction in the water, and I retrieved this as slowly as I possibly could. This brought a bite almost immediately.
There we go. Well, just as the sun is going down, I've landed a small couple of pound pike there. So he's already tempting, so we'll get him straight back.
After unhooking and getting that fish back, I cast out in exactly the same location again and was rewarded straight away with another fish.
Well, another small little pike there, falling to the lure just as the sun goes down. Gonna get this guy slip straight back as well.
To have two fish almost immediately follow each other was great. It felt like all of the hours I'd put in dead baiting and lure fishing was finally being rewarded. Although they were nothing massive, I was happy just to land a string of fish. I feel I've learned a lot from fishing this lake. I went with a specific idea of the kind of tactics and methods I wanted to use, and it just didn't pay off. I had to have a complete rethink and change my methods to how the pike were responding. This was lure fishing. I managed to string a few fish together, and it made the difference between blanking and getting a couple on the bank. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. I know we've all been there where we've had a number of blanks and the relief you feel after finally catching a fish. Also, consider subscribing to my channel. I'm certainly going to be heading back out to this lake at some point, as I feel there are still some surprises this lake has to offer. I hope to see you in the next video. Tight lines.